from don't make it out. I know that I'm blessed. It's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a check.
For those of you that don't know Alex runs part of the service department at Audi here in Lakewood. That's how we met, maybe about a year ago now. And we just hit it off because we started talking about business, and then we started talking about IV drips. And so next thing you know, we're sitting at, an IV, Onus IV in Wheat Ridge, and having a good conversation, and have just gotten to know each other. And based on his goals and where he wants to go, I thought he would be a good guest on the show. But why don't you tell people your name, who you are, and who is Alex Mueller?
Yeah, so happy to be on the show. Appreciate you having me out here. Like you said, we've known each other for about a year and a half now, and just like minds.
Yeah.
My name is Alex Mueller. I'm primarily from Massachusetts. Grew up there. Was born and raised in Wisconsin until I was about 13, but really grew up in Massachusetts. But yeah, I've just worked in the car industry for most of my career, and gotten to the point where looking for bigger and better things.
Was it always in service?
It's always been in service.
Okay, so never sales.
Never sales. I had an opportunity to go into either service or into sales at the beginning of my career, and I decided it was probably a better route for me to go service.
Okay.
Learn the bottom of the business and go up.
Do you think you would ever go into sales?
I would definitely go into sales. Not into car sales.
Not into car sales? Why? What is it about car sales you don't like, or that doesn't attract you to it?
It just doesn't attract me. It just feels like just a type of sales that I'm not interested in. I can't really connect myself with selling a car or selling that product.
So what product can you connect with?
Like you said at the beginning of the podcast, something probably in the wellness sector. I'm thinking IV therapy. I really connect with wellness and, helping people get better, and just seeing people, drag themselves out of an area and just improve.
Is that something you've had to go through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But IV therapy, I think, would be something that I would like to build upon.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big industry. It's growing fast, right? I think that anybody that's a high achiever or a top performer, an athlete, I think that they have a need to have more than just your multivitamin.
Right.
Right. And I know you've done some research on it. There's so many different businesses out there. What is it that you like about this particular business?
Particularly, it brought me out of a dark place that I was in. It brought me out of a substance abuse place. So it took me from an area where I knew I was failing in life, and it helped get me out of it.
Dude, that's spectacular.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like how long ago was that?
I would say about a year ago, year and a half ago.
And I know you're recently married, so congratulations.
Oh yeah, thank you very much.
That. Were you with your wife at that time that you were in that dark place?
I was, yeah. I was coming near the end of it. I've been struggling with, just substance abuse and just going through ups and downs for years. But it came to an end about a year ago. And that's where I found IV therapy and, what it did to help pull me out of that area.
I think that now substance abuse and mental health is something that's starting to just become more talked about. Whereas, it's still a little taboo, and, there's still a lot of shame and guilt around it. And I think that a lot of people that don't understand substance abuse, or that don't really know what it feels like to be an addict, it's very challenging for that type of person to begin to understand why somebody can't just sometimes say no. right? Why they can't just put it down. It's like, well, why can't you just put it down?
Sure.
It's, it's not good for you.
Oh.
You know that it's hurting you. But, one thing I've learned about addiction from my own addiction is that addicts tend to have a problem with obsession and compulsion. And, but the ironic thing is you take the drugs or you take the drink or you take the pills or the Coke or whatever it is, whatever the substance is, you take that out of the system and there you are, still left with all of your shit. Now you just got it without the drugs, right? And so how do you begin to overcome those demons? Because the drugs are just a symptom of the disease of addiction, right? But typically where it really dwells is feelings of inadequacy, or it might be some trigger that causes obsession and compulsion. But a lot of that stuff for me was really rooted back in feelings of unworthiness, never feeling good. And that unworthiness came out in pretty much every area, but it was more pronounced with money in particular. And I feel like it's different for everybody, what actually triggers it. But have you done any work or given some thought to what it was for you that was causing you to solve your problems by going into a place where they can't be solved?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, plenty of thought, plenty of self-realizations and, just looking over how this happened. How did I get here? How did I get to the state where, this is how I'm coping and using this to just get me through a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of time and a lot of thought that goes into that. But I think, time and thought really doesn't help you get to that next stage of being able to let go. You have to have something bigger that's going to pull you out of it. And for me, it started with IV therapy.
There's an emotional connection for you.
Absolutely.
Because of how it helped.
An emotional and a physical.
And a physical. Okay.
So part of, using drugs or using alcohol, you have a physical feeling that you get. You're getting something out of it. And for me, when I replaced that with IV therapy, I was able to, not only feel that way, feel more energy, feel just more vibrant, but my body felt 10 times better. Instead of, taking Adderall, which I'm prescribed to, but you take Adderall and then you drink and you take Adderall and you drink, you get to a point where your body depletes and you get down to a drained state. So replacing that with IV vitamins, I was able to get off of the Adderall. And then eventually I was able to get off of the alcohol. I've been sober now since January 5th of 2024.
Dude.
So
congratulations.
Not drinking.
That's huge. And that's not easy to talk about. So I appreciate you talking about it.
Yeah.
I think if you don't mind, I'd like to go a little deeper on this because it's such a topic that's close to my heart that I've struggled with my entire adult life. Ironically, I was the kid who in high school and even out of high school and into the first couple years of college, I never had anything to drink. I didn't do any drugs.
Right.
So for me, it found me or I found it one way or the other. I got involved with medicating myself, when I was in my 20s, really. Right. And it's been a struggle for me, and there's different ways that I have managed to pull myself out of it. And I've had times where I've been pulled back into it. And so I'm just curious because I don't, this isn't something I talk about a lot with people, but I think it's really important to talk about. And I'm just curious for you, when you think back to when you started, because the disease of addiction is very cunning. It's very insidious. It's very subtle. It's baffling. The whole thing is baffling. But there are things that, you'll find yourself doing that eventually, if you're not careful, it's a slippery slope and it could lead right back to that dark place. But sounds like Adderall and alcohol, and they go hand in hand, right? I've tried both, and they're fantastic. I wouldn't recommend it. I think every drug out there is a stimulant at first. All of them become a poison eventually, every single one of them. But was this something that you were diagnosed with and prescribed, and then you just found yourself wanting more and more? Or was it like the buddy at work is like, here, dude, try this? I mean, listen, it's not a surprise. I was in the car business when I was 19. I mean, listen, there's drugs everywhere you go, really in any career. But how did that start for you? And then what was it that started to, or what was it you noticed that started to turn it into a problem for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most pivotal point of my addiction would have been I got into a snowmobile accident when I was 24 years old. And it was a pretty serious accident. I ended up snapping my tib fib in half at my ankle. Holy crap. They counted somewhere around 27 breaks. I had 3 major surgeries to my leg. But I would say prior to that point in my life, it was a recreational use that started getting out of control. Without elaborating or expanding too much on it, it was, mostly weekends and partying, but I found myself going down that road a little bit more frequently for weekends, and then it would turn into more of a habit. So when I got into this accident, they put you on a significant amount of drugs. They put you on opiates, opioids, and, all of those things. And I found myself getting addicted to Percocets because they overprescribed me, and I was taking a lot more than I should have because, just my party mentality.
That fucking
feels, oh yeah.
Feels phenomenal. Right.
After
you get past the initial, couple days of it, right? Because everyone's always like, well, it puts me to sleep or it knocks me out. Not me, man. That shit was the opposite. You give me cocaine, I'm asleep. In about 5 minutes. You give me opiates and I'm wide awake. I can work 24/7 and focus.
Interesting.
Yeah. So a little different for me, but I know that a lot of times it'll hurt people's stomachs. They won't like the feeling of it initially, and I'm like, well, that's just because you haven't taken it for longer than 3 days.
Right.
Because then it starts to feel fucking really good.
Right. So I got to this point where I was using these opiates to help me with my pain, and I was still partying in between, even, with my leg injury. I was a 25-year-old kid in the car industry, like you said.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where they took me off the opioids and I started withdrawing. And when I got to that point, I knew I was in trouble. I was like, oh man, I was like, I'm addicted to this stuff. This is bad. I didn't have a drive to continue to do opiates. I just knew that I had to get off of it. So the way I got off of it, well, it wasn't that much better. I got off of it by drinking alcohol. I would pour myself a full glass of vodka every night and just down it just to go to sleep. Because I was at a point where I was up for 3 days just withdrawing, and I couldn't sleep. I was just irritable. So the only thing that would get me to bed would be alcohol.
So like typically if they're going to prescribe you something like a Percocet or Vicodin or Oxy or something, they're going to tell you to take it either as needed, twice a day, 3 times a day, 6 times, whatever they prescribe.
Right.
Was this like double, triple, quadruple? Were you running out long before
I ran out a couple times. There's a time where I had to go into the hospital on like a Sunday, and the doctor finally saw me after a few hours, and he was yelling at me because, the doctor who had prescribed me the dose and the amount had already overprescribed me, and I had ran out of that prescription prior to it being ready for refill. So long story short, after a couple painful conversations, I was able to get him to, refill that script. And I really didn't think it was an issue at that point in time.
You'd be great at sales.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like, manipulating doctors, there's a whole thing that goes along with addiction, man, a real dark side to it.
Sure.
And so you got him to prescribe it again.
Got him to prescribe it again, and that was my last refill. And I got to the end of the refill, and I remember just started going back to work with my injury, and the day came where I was, I had 2 pills left, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to take them this morning. I saved 2 pills at home, and I made it to about noon that day at work, and I started feeling nauseous. I started getting headaches, irritability, and I ended up having to leave work. So I was at home, and I remember sitting there. I was just watching a movie, just trying to get my mind off things and just, trying to feel better. And I got to a point where I was like, man, I wonder if I'm withdrawing. I was like, I wonder if it's the medication. So I went and I took the medication. And at this point in this, after I took it, oh, terrible. You feel like cold sweats, you feel nauseous, you feel angry, you feel all sorts of different emotions, depressed. You feel it. Everything felt very gray, if there's a way to describe it. And then I had this moment, where I was forcing myself to watch this movie, and I sat at home for a good 2.5 hours before I realized I was like, I think I'm withdrawing. And I was like, I wonder. So I went and I grabbed the medication and I chewed it up, because at some point along the line with taking these opiates, you just start chewing them. You do. Yeah. No one tells you to do it. No one's like, hey, you should chew it. It'll hit your system faster. So threw it in, started chewing it up. About 5 minutes later, I was like, oh, all my symptoms went away. And that scared the hell out of me. Scared me. So I took the other last pill, because I'd already taken one. So I took the last one, and that was it. That was it from there. Never touched it again.
Really good for you.
But
good for you.
I switched to the alcohol, and that's where alcohol became a regular use, more than just weekends, just partying, just having fun.
Where was your wife with all of this? Like, did she know you were going through this? Was this something you talked about with her, or you kind of kept it from her because you felt maybe?
Oh, so we weren't together. This was way before.
Way before.
Yeah, we've been together. Okay. It'll be 4 years in July.
Okay, but she went through the recent, like you said, about a year ago. You got off of alcohol, so she went through that with you.
Yeah, the ups and downs with alcohol. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so then came in the Adderall part of things. Mm. So I'd always been ADHD, and I'd been prescribed Adderall, Ritalin since I was 7 years old. Mm-hmm. On and off, I never used it. So at some point further along the line, probably my mid to late 20s, like 27, I got represcribed, and I started taking it because I was drinking so much that I needed something to keep me focused, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm ADHD. I just, need Adderall. So what happens with that is, you start self-medicating, you start taking more than you're prescribed. And that just becomes more and more and more and more and more and more. And it just turns into a kind of a nasty cycle. But, I was doing that to just be able to fuel my drinking,
I mean, I've done both before, but when you say fuel your drinking, are you referring to
I would get tired.
Uh-huh.
You get tired. So I'd work a 70-hour week,
mm-hmm.
And I'd want to drink at the end of my days.
Mm-hmm.
And, being a young person, you want to go out and enjoy yourself. So
mm-hmm.
when you're falling asleep at 8, 9 o'clock at night because
mm-hmm.
of alcohol, you'd find a way to figure that out. And for me, it was Adderall.
Hmm.
So,
Adderall is so widely prescribed, right? Same with Ritalin. And
yeah.
My wife and I are reading this book right now that is called The Explosive Child. And for anybody that has, kids that are really I don't really know a better way to say it because we love our kids, but that is explosive, like the book suggests, where, they're super stubborn, they're demanding, they throw tantrums, they scream, they throw stuff across the room. And I mean, just when you think of an out of control child, that's something that we've been struggling with. And so this book called The Explosive Child is phenomenal. And it kind of talks about these underlying concerns that the child has, or unsolved problems is how they describe it. Right. And so if you think about a tantrum, whether it's a kid or an adult, or you think about an outburst like that, what this author is suggesting is that all of that's actually coming from a place where there's a problem that hasn't been solved. And so for anybody with kids, it's a phenomenal book. I would highly recommend it. But they do talk about medication in there. Sure. And they tread very lightly on the topic. And, whether you prescribe or not prescribe, that's, I think, a decision that only parents can make. But with Adderall in particular, with Ritalin, it seems like there's this, there are legitimate cases where people are struggling with ADHD, and it's something that can absolutely help. And then I think there are a lot of people in the medical profession out there where it's not something that really is necessary, but they just know that they've got this drug they can lean on and prescribe.
Right.
And I think a lot of it's overprescribed. For you, now looking back, was it something that you felt at the time was prescribed to you appropriately, or do you think it was not necessary?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mean, I live without it now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't use it. There are days where, I look at life and I'm like, oh man, it'd be great to have that kick in the ass to, focus and get some of these tasks done.
Mm-hmm.
But when I make it through those feelings and I accomplish the tasks that I need to be done, I really don't see it being a benefit in my life right now.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about those feelings that you just said, because you're like, when I get through those feelings and I get the task done.
Oh yeah.
And that question's coming from a place of like, I think we all have feelings that we struggle with that oftentimes get in the way. And when those feelings come up for us, we can suppress them. Mm-hmm. We can talk about them. We can go do some physical exercise to get it out of our system. We can write about it. If you're like me, you can go take drugs and try to suppress it and numb it out, right? Which is never the solution, and it never has been the solution for me, even though at the time it felt like it was the right solution. Ultimately, again, it turns into a poison and starts to take from you the very thing that you took it for in the first place to get.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about those feelings that you would experience that caused you to go, ooh, if I only had this Adderall, that would fix it.
Simply completing daunting tasks that I don't have energy or motivation for, which is interesting because I weed out a lot of things that I'm uninterested in life now. For instance, like the car business. I've lost interest in that years ago. It's very taxing. It's very grueling. It's uninteresting to me, unattractive in so many different ways. But when you're taking drugs like Adderall and you're drinking frequently and you're using other drugs to mask those feelings, you stay stuck. You stay in a place where you shouldn't be. So for me, I have enlightenment where I'm like, okay, it's okay to feel these feelings of frustration and anxiety and, feeling stuck, because I'm going to get myself unstuck instead of staying in the same place I've been for years. And for me, I mean, that was, another motivation to kick the habits that I had. I would call them more habits. Addiction's a real strong word. I it's accurate, but I would say habits. When you fall into these bad habits, or you fall into habits that turn into a chemical addiction, it can spiral.
So imagine you had a 25-year-old, I think is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Is kind of when some of this stuff happened for you. Imagine you had a 25-year-old son. Okay. And that son was sitting here across the table from you, and you knew that he was struggling with habits or addiction to chemicals. And you knew he had a dependency.
Yeah.
Like, what is it you would say to him? And what is it you would say to really the audience, if they're, for somebody that might be in a really, really dark place right now, for somebody that might also be struggling with a chemical dependency or an addiction concern, what would you say to that person? And what is something they could do to help themselves to get out of that situation?
You have to find something that makes you happy. And you have to find something that is healthy. So for me, I was stuck in a situation where the people around me and the situations I put myself in were not good for me. And that created a significant amount of unhappiness in my life. And that unhappiness fueled more of the bad behaviors that led me to where I was, which was staying stuck. So finding the courage to go chase after something that could make you happy is the best advice I can give you. Me moving out to Colorado was the biggest thing I've ever done in my life, changing my environment and changing my environment for myself and going towards something that made me happy was empowering. So I won't say it's easy. And I know it's not easy because you have to make that decision, but if you can make that decision to do something selfish and make yourself happy and change your environment and get away from those things that are dragging you down, that's step number one for success.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you back, dude.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Turn that loss to a check. Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck. Nah.